Hey everyone, Jordan here at Totally Bored, and today we're taking a look at Viticulture World, the 1 to 6 player cooperative expansion for viticulture. Now, as with all of my reviews, I'm going to be taking a look at 4 different elements. First up, we have the theme. Second, we have the gameplay. Third, we have the value. And last, we have my impressions. Now, in Viticulture World, you are working together to have the best vineyard and to achieve global recognition. This is a worker placement game, so your actions will consist of sending out your workers to a variety of worker placement locations, doing things like planting and harvesting grapes, making wine, fulfilling orders, and a lot more. Now, unique to Viticulture World are the new innovation tiles, and essentially what these are doing are upgrading existing worker placement locations, making them a lot stronger, and hopefully making it easier for you and your friends to achieve victory. Now, in order to win in this game, each player must reach 25 victory points, and as a collective, you must reach 10 influence. Now, the first element we have is the theme. Now, I'll be taking a look at 3 things here. We have the art, the components, and the story elements, if any. Now, taking a look at the art by Andrew Bosley, I feel like he did a really good job at making this just feel elegant. It matches that theme very well, and I just think it does a good job of what they are trying to portray into the game. Now, looking at the components, I feel like this is nothing to write home about, nor is it anything to complain about, really. I mean, the cards feel fine in your hand. It does come with wooden workers, which is nice, as well as cute little hats you can put on there, so maybe a few bonus points in there for components. And then lastly, the story elements in the game. So really all you're getting is the continent decks, which are going to provide a little bit of flavor text and background into each continent and a little bit of history on winemaking and viticulture in that continent. So I think that actually is a nice touch, but you also can't go into this expecting like a campaign game. This is a one-off game at the end of the day. Next up, we have the gameplay. Now here I'll be taking a look at the mechanisms, the player interaction, as well as the duration or the pace of the game. When it comes to mechanisms, this is a pure worker placement game. You're going to be spending all of your actions sending your workers to different spots, performing all of these different actions like drawing cards, planting and harvesting grapes, making wine, and so on. If you are not a fan of worker placement games, you are not going to like this game because that's all you're doing the entire game. I myself am not the biggest fan actually of just pure worker placement games, but I'll get to that here in a little bit under the impressions part of the video. Now, what I really did like though is the player interaction in this game. You are working to reach that 25 victory points for each player along with that collective 10 influence. And what that really means is that it is difficult, basically impossible for quarterbacking or for one person to take over and just make all of the decisions because you have those individual scoring methods. You really have to work to be, as efficient, as effective as you can and pick up the slack on your own game. And I really enjoy that. And this game's difficult too, Throughout the entirety of the game, there was so much collaboration and just table talk of, what should we do here? What's the best time to do this? And so on. And I love that. So very high marks in regards to player interaction in Viticulture World. Now, the last point is the pace or the duration of the game. The box lists this at 75 to 95 minutes, and the majority of my games were quite a bit longer than that, like 3 hours. I will say I played mostly at the higher player counts. I think if you scale this down into those lower player counts, like 1 to 3 players, that is probably more achievable. But from my experience, it definitely lasted longer than the listed time. Next up, we have the value of the game. So here I'll be looking at the replayability, the accessibility of the game, as well as asking, is it worth the money? Now, when it comes to replayability, you have these continent decks, which are essentially changing up the game every single round for your group. It's going to be things like new worker placement locations. It's going to be things that can usually help you, and then sometimes things that can hurt you or make it a little more challenging for your group that round. Now, once you've played through these several times, I feel like it does kind of lose steam just because you expect what's going to happen. So for the first few times, it's going to be really fun and engaging, but after that, I feel like it does kind of take a little bit of a dive when it comes to replayability. Now, accessibility. This is currently listed at 3.08 out of 5 on Board Game Geek's rating scale, which is considered medium weight. I do think that, in my opinion, this game is more challenging for sure than base Viticulture. There's a lot more going on. and it's not the most accessible game. That doesn't really matter to me, but you can't really go into this assuming it's going to be, more easier just because it is a cooperative version of the game. It's still really hard, if not harder than base Viticulture. So you just have to know what you're getting into. This is not some gateway entry-level game. This is a challenging game, so be ready for that. Now, is it worth the money? This is currently listed at $29 on Stonemaier shop, and in my opinion, I do think it's worth $29. I actually really enjoy having this game as a cooperative experience. You do get quite a bit of content packed in there for $29, but if you are looking at this like pure retail, which I believe is $45, I don't think that is worth it. Now, I don't think you're really gonna see it listed at that price very often, but if you do, I don't think it's worth that, in my opinion. I feel like you should wait for a sale, but if you can find it for like 30 bucks, it is a good buy. Finally, we have my impressions of the game, where I'll be going through the pros, the cons, and then giving you my own personal rating of the game. So starting with the pros, I feel like the art and aesthetic is very beautiful. I think it's a very elegant game, and it really stands out, especially from other games in my collection. So I really, really like that about Viticulture and Viticulture World. I also think the player interaction in this expansion is through the roof, and I really, really like that about it. You have to actually have that table talk, that conversation, if you want to win, because it is no joke. This game is very, very difficult. I also like the continent decks in here because they add just enough variation to make it more interesting round to round, and I enjoyed that a lot. Now, looking at the cons. Now, of course, this is anecdotal from my plays and my experiences, but this game just takes too long. Now, on the game box, it lists 75 to 95 minutes. My games were typically upwards of 3 hours. Now, that's just really, really long, and looking back, I don't know why it took so long, but at the same time, I feel like it's going to be hard to table this because of that length. I also think the accessibility can be somewhat of a con, just because people might go into this expecting, oh yeah, it's going to be a cooperative fun experience, and it will slap you in the face because it is so difficult. So I'm not going to list that as a con, but just keep that in mind that it might be depending on your group and your style of play. Now, I also don't really love worker placement only games, so this is entirely personal preference, but it is one of my personal cons. Some of my favorite games have in some way worker placement involved, but it's not like purely worker placement where that's all you're doing, and to me it just doesn't feel that fun to do that. So that is another con for me. And then lastly, I feel like the replayability is not the highest. Once you play through these scenario or these continent decks, you've kind of seen everything, and that, in my opinion, just knocks the score down just a little bit. And I'm actually coming in at a 6.5 out of 10. This is an above average game. I do enjoy it. It's not something that I'm always wanting to play and always in the mood for, and I actually have this slightly higher than base Viticulture, which I have at a 6 out of 10. So I hope this was able to help you guys make some sort of decision. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree with my review. This is Jordan here at Totally Bored. I appreciate you watching. Have a good day.